Hello and welcome to Treaties Recognition Week at the University of Waterloo. The Indigenous Initiatives team has prepared a week of informative virtual events and videos to help our community gain a better understanding of treaties negotiated in Ontario. The treaties signed with Indigenous populations in Ontario over the last 250 years continue to affect us all. We can all do our part to better understand the scope of how these treaties have shaped and impacted our world and Indigenous communities across our province.
Welcome to Treaties Recognition Week here at the University of Waterloo. Miigwech to everyone who is joining us today, and miigwech to President Hamdulapur for the warm welcome and the kickoff message. So we'll get started with some introductions, and Jean, how about you start us off?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jean Becker. I'm the Senior Director, Indigenous Initiatives at the University of Waterloo. I have been with the university since January of 2020, and I'm really excited about all of the initiatives that are underway already, and I'm so looking forward to um, building a really strong Indigenous with a really committed response to the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations. And I'm really happy to introduce to you Robin Stadelbauer, who is the very first Indigenous Initiatives Coordinator at the University of Waterloo. So welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Jean. Miigwech. I'll introduce myself a little bit. Um, Rob Indigenous Cause, Neoshingaming Donjaba, Nagig Dodem, Kitchener and Diane. And what I just said there was Robin is my name. I am Otter Clan. I am from Neoshingaming, otherwise known as the Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nations on the Bruce Peninsula. And I live in Kitchener. I started my position a few weeks ago, and I am so happy to be here. As Jean said, I am the Indigenous Initiatives Coordinator. Jean and I are a team of two. While I am new to this role, I am not new to Waterloo. I have been here since 2008 and have enjoyed working on campus, and I am thrilled to be working in an Indigenous focus role alongside Jean. So I will get us started. This is just a short video to kick off Treaties Recognition Week here at the University of Waterloo. Jean and I will have a short conversation to discuss what Treaties Recognition Week is and how it came about, why the University of Waterloo is participating in this week, and then we will bring forward a broad overview of what is the treaty and give a little preview about what you can expect for the remainder of the week. So how about I'm going to do this by asking Jean a series of questions, and then we will just kind of have a conversation throughout these questions. So Jean, would you be able to tell us what is Treaties Recognition Week?
So, Treaties Recognition Week really came about as a response to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. In 2016, Ontario passed legislation proclaiming the first week of November as Treaties Recognition Week in Ontario. 2020 will be the first year the University of Waterloo officially participates in this Treaties Recognition Week, and we're really excited with the events that we have planned for the week. We're going to host a series of virtual events, share videos and information about surrounding treaties, and to help create awareness about treaties, we'll also take an in-depth look at the treaties that affect this area of Ontario, the area that we're living in.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about this myself. I've lived in KW for quite a long time, but I'm looking forward to learning some more detail about the treaties that affect this area. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about why Treaties Recognition Week was created? I know you had mentioned it was um, a reaction to the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, but could you tell us a little bit more?
So the government of Ontario actually considers this week to be part of their work to rebuild trust and establish better relationships with treaty partners and Indigenous peoples. And this, of course, includes educating Ontarians about the role that treaties play in our lives and relationships today. These treaties, people often think about them as being something from the past, but they actually are living documents that impact our lives still. And I think it's really important in the work of reconciliation that people understand this and recognize it.
Okay, thank you. How about, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about maybe what exactly is a treaty? I know you had just mentioned that it is a living document. Could you tell us a little bit more detail about what a treaty is?
So, first of all, it's a legally binding document. So, all the treaties are legally binding on two parties. So, treaties don't just involve Indigenous people, which I think is the impression a lot of us have that this is Indigenous somehow. It's between two parties, which means Indigenous people of Canada, we're just one party. The other party is the Canadian government. So treaties outline the rights, responsibilities, and relationships of First Nations and the federal and provincial governments. And of course, they impact on other levels of government, such as the municipalities and the regions. The first treaty, which was the Royal Proclamation of 1763, laid out the process for subsequent treaties. There are two different kinds of treaties today. One is the historic, and the other is the modern treaties. Historic treaties are still absolutely relevant, and they still have to be upheld today. A big part of understanding those treaties today involves translating what the treaty said in 200 years ago to what does that mean in today's terms, because obviously as time goes on, circumstances change and you have to reinterpret the treaties. So that's work that has to be done through negotiation between Indigenous governments and um, federal and provincial governments. The historic treaties are the basis for many of the land claims that are so sometimes in the media quite a bit, and the interpretation of them and the specific wording is as I just said, continues to have to be renegotiated.
Well, thank you, Jean. How about can we talk a little bit about the significance of these treaties? The significance on relationships today and in society today.
So I believe that the treaties are absolutely fundamental to the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in Canada. Um, Not understanding those treaties leads to a lot of misunderstanding. particularly, I would say, on the part of non-Indigenous people, because the treaties really define how we mean to share this territory and the agreements that we have. And when one party doesn't understand that there are legally binding agreements that have been made, then they don't adhere to them. And I would point to the situation that's currently happening in the fisheries in Nova Scotia as an example of this. So not only the relationship between First Nations and different levels of government, between Métis people and the Inuit and the government, the treaties have influence over the social structures and the general relationship between how Indigenous and non-Indigenous people can live together on this territory.
So pretty significant.
Yeah.
It's great that this week exists, Treaties Recognition Week. I hope that a lot of our listeners today and a lot of other folks are able to partake in some activities surrounding Treaties Recognition Week. Maybe before we wrap this up, we can go over a little bit of the numbers, perhaps. Do you have any information on perhaps how many treaties exist in Canada or in Ontario that you could share with us?
So in Canada, the government recognizes over 70 treaties with 364 First Nations. And then, of course, there are treaties with the Métis and Inuit as well. In Ontario, there are more than 40 treaties and other agreements covering the whole province. So about 92% of people in Ontario live in the Upper Canada Treaties area, which covers all of southern Ontario to Sudbury and over to Ottawa. And the Upper Canada treaties are historic treaties, and there are other treaties that have been made since that time within that territory. It's mentioning that treaties form the basis of the relationship between Indigenous people and government, and in general, treaties have and continue to strongly influence the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people generally. And I have to say, I've always noticed that Indigenous people often are much more aware of treaties than non-Indigenous people. And this is an area that, as educators, we really have to do a better job of teaching treaties public.
I agree. I agree with you. Um, do you have anything else that you would like to share before we wrap this up and get and speak about what's happening for the remainder of this week?
Not really, except, I know that in the Western provinces, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, for instance, that the treaties have been much more, there's been much more awareness about the treaties out there than there has been in Ontario. But, um, as we just pointed out, most of the province is treaty territory. So I think that this is a really important week, and I'm looking forward to in this week to doing some work toward sharing some of the important issues around treaties with our University of Waterloo community. And in future years, we hopefully can expand beyond the local area and look at some of the other areas of Canada as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn in preparing for this week. I myself learned quite a bit about treaties in Ontario, and then expanded a little bit across Canada. So there is a lot to learn, and there's a lot of information out there, kind of easy to digest information, and then some that is a little bit more in depth, or a lot more in depth, depending on where you are and what it is that you're wanting to learn. Um, so it's great. It's great to see all of this information close at hand. So I'll go over a little bit of preview of what the University of Waterloo community can expect this week. So you've heard a little bit about what is a treaty and what Treaties Recognition Week is all about today from Jean. And then for this week, we also have lined up a few guest speakers, and one of our very own professors, Professor Susan Roy, who is an associate professor in the history department here in the Faculty of Arts. Professor Roy will give a historical presentation surrounding treaties, and then Indigenous and government relations over a lunch and learn. And then we will hear from Phil Montour from the Six Nations of the Grand River, who will share his wealth of in-depth knowledge on the Haldimand Treaty of 1784. This is a pretty significant treaty to this area of the Waterloo region and communities along the Grand River. And then we will also hear from Chief Laforme from the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. He will share with us the treaties that affect our communities and his community. And then on Friday, the last day, day 5, we will hear from Jean again and Professor Susan Roy, and they will sit down and they will, they will kind of give an overview of the week and a wrap-up session, and it will be titled. It's titled Reflections and Takeaways, where they will share their thoughts and takeaways on treaties and then what was discussed in the week. And then you will also, our participants will also get a chance to share your reflections and takeaways, which I'm looking forward to hearing about. Yeah, so that's what we have lined up, and then we will also be sharing. I just had mentioned that I came across a number of resources and information in preparing for this week, and we will share a number of those resources and information out through our webpage for everybody to take a look at. That is all for me. Jean, would you like to say anything else?
I just, throughout the week, we hope that you will take what you learn about what a treaty is and, join us to hear more specific details from some experts on these topics. And hopefully you'll reflect over what you are learning and taking in and share your thoughts with us afterwards in the Friday afternoon session. And mostly, we hope that you gain an understanding or deeper understanding, perhaps, of how important the treaties are for everybody in Canada. Thank you all very much.
Miigwech, Jean, to you for sharing your knowledge.
Nakumik.